Today on the Coral Ridge Hour.
What people believe doesn't determine reality. Now, that may come as a shock to postmodern Americans, but it is true. Now may we hear together the Word of God as our text is found in Acts 17, verse 31. May we hear the inspired word of the living God. Because he hath appointed a day in the which he will judge the world in righteousness by that man whom he hath ordained, whereof he hath given assurance unto all men, in that he hath raised him from the dead. And may God speak to our hearts and minds today through his holy word, and may his name ever be praised. Amen. Judgment Day. I wonder what kind of pictures that conjures up in your heart and mind. Are they pleasant, or are they terrifying? Well, for a Christian, they should be pleasant. Here is the consummation of the love of Jesus Christ. We have identified ourselves with him in baptism, and here at that great day, he will identify himself with his own people, and they will be vindicated in their faith and in their cause, and they will receive the rewards that Christ has promised to give to those who have been faithful unto him. It is a glorious, wonderful day. Now, for unbelievers, however, it is a horse of a very different color. Dies irae, a day of woe, of ire, of wrath, as they used to say. It is certainly a day that in the minds of many stirs up pictures of a court, a judge, advocates, lawyers, and all of the other juridical accoutrements of such an occasion as the great assize, the final judgment day. If you're anything of a historian, or if you read modern nonfiction, you're familiar with the name of Dr. Paul Johnson, the author of numerous modern history books, including the famous Modern Times. And he said that when the church does not clearly teach the doctrine of hell, society loses an important anchor. In a sense, hell gives meaning to our lives. It tells us that the moral choices we make day by day give eternal significance to them, that our behavior has consequences lasting to eternity, and that God himself takes our choices seriously. Chuck Colson said that when people don't believe in a final judgment, they don't feel ultimately accountable for their actions. There is no firm leash holding back sinful impulses. As the book of Judges puts it, there is no fear of God in their hearts, and everyone does what is right in his own eyes. A few years ago, the Sun Sentinel carried an article by David Briggs entitled "Threat of Hell Doesn't Pack Its Old Terrors." And it's a sociological piece that simply analyzes the fact that today modern Americans are not as impressed, concerned, and certainly not terrified by the threat of hell, and that many Americans don't even believe in it. In fact, though some 80% of the American people believe that there will be a judgment, it seems that very few of them believe that they have any chance of going to hell or running even a serious risk thereof. But I thought as I read this article that the thrust of it seemed to be that if the American people don't believe something anymore, therefore, it's not real. Sociology is an infinity below theology, my friends. What people believe doesn't determine reality. Now, that may come as a shock to many of our modern New Agers and postmodern Americans, but it is true. God exists whether people believe in him or not. And heaven exists whether people believe it or not. And hell exists whether anybody believes in it or not. I think about the story that Jesus told of Lazarus and Dives. And Dives was the rich man, Lazarus the poor beggar that begged for crumbs outside his door. And you remember that Dives, we're told, went to bed one night in his soft, comfortable bed with his silk sheets and fluffed up his soft pillow and laid his head upon that, and with a faint smile of self-satisfaction, he went to sleep. Now, it was obvious that his thoughts were not the least bit concerned with the eternal judgment of God or his relationship to the Almighty. But in spite of that, Jesus put it this way: in hell, he opened his eyes, being in torment. Do you think God is impressed that Dives doesn't believe in hell? Do you think God is impressed that you don't believe in it? Let me tell you something. Most of the people there didn't believe in it. They do now. And that's part of the problem in America today. It's interesting, I think, that one of the scholars of recent time said, if you would understand the progress and development of nations, you must simply study the doctrine of hell. And you will find a direct correlation between what people believe about the eternal judgment and justice of the Almighty and what happens in those societies as they, without that, when the leash is cut loose, crumble into decadence, and finally, as 26 civilizations have already done, they are destroyed from within because of internal corruption. Yes, my friends, it does make a difference. Now, some, however, have said, but hell isn't fair. Is that true? No, it is not. Tragically, hell is the ultimate fairness. It is heaven that is not fair. And if you don't know that, you haven't got a clue about what Christianity is. Hell is fair and heaven is not, because all have sinned and come short of the glory of God, and there's none righteous, no, not one. There's not a just man upon the face of the earth that doeth good and sinneth not. We are together become unprofitable. Ye are condemned already, said Christ. And therefore, if we get fairness, if we get justice, we will be justly condemned. If we go to heaven, it will be because of the other principle that operates in this universe, and that is the principle of grace. Heaven is given to those who absolutely don't deserve it. I'm going to go to heaven. It's not fair. You're right. It's way above fair. It's grace. It's mercy. Thank God I'm not going to get fairness. I remember when I was in seminary being sent out to a jail to preach, and I talked to about 20 men in a large holding cell there, and I started talking to them about the gospel, and this young man, probably 21 or so, walked up to the bars and looked at me with hatred in his eyes and said, "Mister," he said, "you just go tell that God of yours that all I want from him is what I deserve." I said, "Young man, if you got what you deserved, the floor would open up and you would go straight to hell right now. That's what you deserve." And I said, "I'm not saying that because you're inside those bars and I'm outside, because if I got what I deserved, that's exactly what would happen to me." I continue to hear people tell me every week, practically, I am a good person. And I say to them, "Dear friend, you've got a problem. You've got a problem when you stand before your judge. Because your judge says there's none good, no, not one. And you say you are good. One of you is wrong. Guess which one?" A man said to me one time, "Oh, I live a good life. I keep the commandments, and I've never accepted Jesus or joined a church, but I don't need him because I've lived a good life." And he said, "That's what I'm going to tell God when I come to the judgment." I said, "Dear friend, you've got a problem. Because when you get ready to tell your judge that you don't need this Jesus fellow, you're going to be astonished to discover that the judge to whom you're speaking is that Jesus fellow. All judgment has been given into the hands of the Son, that he may be equal with the Father. So the person to whom you're speaking about ignoring or rejecting Christ is Christ. He is the judge of all of the earth. He has appointed a day by which he will judge the world by that man whom he has appointed, and has given us assurance in that he has raised him from the dead. I think of a woman who was informed that she was going to be involved in a court trial, a lawsuit, a serious one. And she realized that she ought to contact her lawyer, but she postponed it. She procrastinated. She didn't want to do it. But finally, as she began to hear more and more of the seriousness of the situation, she finally picked up the phone and called him and told him that she needed his services as her lawyer. And he said, "I'm terribly sorry, madam, but you are too late. I cannot be your lawyer, for I have been appointed your judge."
Next time on the Coral Ridge Hour.
We don't have a pagan religion as such overwhelming our nation, but we have secularism, atheism, humanism, all of which agree in denying Christ and the Christian religion.
And then,
global warming is the totalitarian's dream come true. If you can control energy, you can control people's lives.
next time on the Coral Ridge Hour. This has been a production of Coral Ridge Ministries.